It's reported that both Charles and William raised concerns about Andrew walking his mother to her seat, but Her Majesty overruled both of them. It's claimed that she said it was her wish and final decision, that's a quote, to arrive with her son, the Duke of York. So, should Charles have done more? Perhaps he should have insisted that he walk her down the aisle instead. That would have caused less chaos, wouldn't it, Mike?
Well, it would have done, but I think we've got to get this straight. Nobody can overrule the Queen at all.
Apart from the future king?
No, can't overrule the Queen. She's the head of the family. That's the way the monarchy works. It goes right from the top, right the way down, OK? He couldn't possibly have overruled her. And why would he want to overrule his 95-year-old mother anyway, when her wish, and she says this repeatedly, people forget, I have 4 children, and she wanted to make them all feel equally welcome, because remember, it was in commemoration of their father. So why should one of them be isolated? What I think should have happened is that the Duke of York should have got to the door of the Abbey and then stood aside. And I think the Dean was on the running order of the service to walk her up the aisle, OK? So why did he suddenly decide to take over? And the big fear, I'm told, from people who know these things, is that Prince William and Prince Charles think that Andrew used his mother to try and whitewash his reputation, literally hiding behind his mother's skirt, looking for rehabilitation because he wants to become a part of the celebrations for the 70th anniversary later this year to start his trip back into society and his trip back into royal service.
It sounds a little bit like you are back to insisting that this is Andrew's doing and not the Queen's, but the Queen has said that it was her wish and final decision. So this has come from Her Majesty herself. Now, in that situation, is it not the future King's role to say, look, Mum, I know that as a mother you want to include your other son, but this risks the monarchy in the future and this is a bad decision. Shouldn't she have taken his comments or his thoughts into consideration?
Absolutely, yeah. Look, I don't know the internal workings of the British monarchy, and I don't think most people do, except for the people at the very top. But, look, I've got an old-fashioned view on this. If you don't want to end up being barred from public life, don't associate yourself for many years, with a paedophile and a rapist. Don't end up in a situation where you're settling millions of pounds to a survivor who has publicly accused you of rape. That's what this individual, that's the situation he's in. Being in public life is not a right. It's not, if you read the UN Declaration of Human Rights, a right people have. The vast majority of people aren't in public life. No one's saying he should be barred from his dad's funeral, obviously. Even people who commit the most gross crimes should be allowed to go to their parents' funerals. The issue is being given a ceremonial role. The Queen was completely wrong to allow that to happen. And yes, even though Prince Charles and Prince William rightly objected to it, obviously I think more should have been done. This, for me, is about a very sacred issue, which is that in our society, the vast majority of survivors of rape and sexual assault don't feel able to come forward and they don't feel believed. And it, for many people, feels like a mockery, not just of those survivors of Epstein, but of all survivors in general, if they see somebody who is publicly associated and, I'm afraid, himself complicit, being allowed to be presented as this as acceptable, respectable, arm in arm with the head of state of the country. And that sends off a horrendous message in British society about how we treat sexual violence. I
don't know if we can say that he is complicit. He wasn't found guilty of anything at all. But he did associate.
And the statement's very clear, by the way, because the statement makes it clear that she's not a liar. Virginia, I mean, that's the point. It's a really important point. So I think we can say there he's ended up settling millions of pounds worth of money against someone who's publicly accused him of rape. The issue is he was publicly associated, a long-standing associate of a rapist and a paedophile. Yeah. And even after that man, Epstein, was convicted of his first offence, he continued to associate with it.
He went for a long weekend to end the friendship because he's that kind of loyal individual.
Come off it. I think if you had a friend who was a rapist and a paedophile, as if you go and spend a long weekend with him to end your friendship. I mean, what is that? You know, it's not a relationship. It's not a marriage. Well, you know it's ludicrous. It's ludicrous.
The royals have funny ways, and maybe that's one of them. In order,
but isn't this self-awareness missing in all this? Everything you've just said, Owen, is completely right. But if remember Profumo many years ago, way before your time, Storm, obviously. obviously, but he was a public figure who was disgraced, and he lied in the House and he went away for 35 years and was never seen again until he got an award for working for charity. That's what the Duke of York should do now. Get out of our lives, get out of our faith. We don't want to see you again.
We're very, very much focusing on the Queen and Andrew here, and it's understandable since as they were the two that were walking down the aisle and caused all the headlines. However, my question is, you've got Andrew, who isn't very self-aware, it would appear, if he thinks that that interview with Emily Maitlis went well. We can say that he's not understanding of the public perception of himself. The Queen is a mother fundamentally and has certain beliefs for her child. So isn't it Charles, as the future king's responsibility to put his foot down and say, Mum, on this occasion...
He couldn't overrule her.
I have to insist that I walk you down to your seat.
You couldn't overrule the Queen, honestly. You can't overrule the Queen. Once she's made her mind up and said, no, I want Andrew to walk me up the aisle. I mean, what are we going to have? A public spat inside Westminster Abbey and saying, right, Andrew, get out of the way.
He could have said, I'll withdraw. I will withdraw from my role in the ceremony. I will attend the funeral of my late father. He was never going to say that. I will withdraw from... I will keep going to the funeral of my late father, who I love very much. But I will not take part in a ceremony because the issue of sexual violence is so important. Look, you're right, she's a mother. She's also a head of state. She's a symbol of the nation. That's not my choice. I'm in a minority, but most people do accept her as the head of state. I prefer an election partly for these reasons, because then they're held accountable and they can't just behave in this way, knowing that they can't be removed, so their actions have no consequences. But the reality is, she is the head of state. She is the symbol of the nation. And by doing this, you end up in a situation where I'm afraid the issue of male violence against women is not taken as seriously as it should by the symbol of the nation. Of course, I think Prince Charles could have said, I'll take part in the ceremony, but you've got to choose. If you're letting this guy carry on in the ceremony, I'm not taking part.